Whether Horus knew how important it was for the Emperor to deliver Magnus to Terra alive is unknown, but he achieved his goal of destroying the 15th Legion. With Magnus silenced by his tales of heresy, he could no longer influence the War Master's implementation of his cunning plans. In those troubled times, neither the Imperium, nor the Primarchs, nor even a seasoned sorcerer like Magnus fully recognized the existence of chaos and the dark gods, and many were easily swayed by destructive forces through ignorance. One of the unfortunate souls was the Primarch of the 3rd Legion, who came to be called the Phoenix-born Lord Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children. A white-haired boy landed on the dying mining world of Chemos. At the capsule impact site, a spring of clean water was struck, the planet's most precious resource, and the scout who found the boy named him Waterbringer, or Fulgrim. Fulgrim rose from a simple laborer, showing many uncanny understanding of machinery and a rare gift for practical innovation, to the leader of the settlement, and later, ruler of the whole planet. Thanks to Fulgrim's administrative talent, the world's decline was halted, resource consumption was made more efficient, and new industries were established. Eventually, Chemos revived to the point that artistic pursuits, previously seen as needless resource drains, returned to the people's lives. From that time, Fulgrim retained both perfectionism and a love for beauty. When the Emperor arrived on the world, Fulgrim was awed and gladly agreed to join the Great Crusade. The only problem was that almost all of the 3rd Legion's gene seed stock had been lost, leaving Fulgrim with roughly 200 warriors. But that only strengthened his resolve to prove his devotion to the Father and to make his legion the best. "We are his children," he said to them. "Let everyone who gaze upon us know it, and we shall not fail his hopes for lack of merit. Let us fulfill his hopes. We are the Emperor's children." Fulgrim's speech impressed the Emperor so much, he granted the Legion the right to bear the Aquila on their armor, the Emperor's personal symbol, and named them Emperor's children. The restoration of their gene seed stock took time. Because of his legion's small size, Fulgrim could not immediately crusade on his own. So with the warriors he had, he joined Horus's Lunar Wolves. Fighting along each other, the two legions developed mutual respect, and their Primarchs became friends. Horus said that the Emperor's children truly embodied the ideal of the Legio Astartes. When the gene seed problem was solved, and the Emperor's children's numbers restored, Fulgrim started his own campaigns. The Emperor's children focused intensely on any task, and most of all, they were obsessed with the conduct of war. Legionaries accepted nothing less than perfection. When another legion excelled in a particular aspect of warfare, the Emperor's children learned from them. They devoted themselves to training until they achieved mastery. Methods were honed to perfection. Some of their doctrines surpassed even the exemplary tenets of the Ultramarines. However, in the Legion's culture, there grew a belief in the superiority of certain martial virtues over others. A belief shaped by Primarch Fulgrim's opinions and inclinations and accepted by the warriors as unquestionable doctrine. One virtue was speed. Whether in maneuver, action, or attack, speed was valued above strength, endurance, and even firepower. The warrior who struck first would most likely win, and moving targets were harder to hit. This doctrine influenced both battle plans and the Legion's preferred armaments. In battle, the Emperor's children displayed feats of courage, astonishing even for Space Marines. They fought not merely because a fight was necessary, but because they believed in their destiny and gave themselves entirely, whether in a huge engagement or a small patrol skirmish. But the Legion had flaws. When another Legion was praised, the Emperor's children took it as an insult to their pride and a spur to improve. The inability to match others bred envy. Superiority bred contempt for those they deemed lesser. No matter how high they rose or what they achieved, it was never enough. The thirst for perfection was boundless and unsatiable, and pride is the path to heresy and a tool of the dark gods. After the Ulanor triumph, the Emperor's children waged a hard campaign on the oceanic worlds of Laeran. In the final assault, led by Fulgrim himself, they captured the central temple ferociously defended by the Laeran warriors. Bursting into the temple, Fulgrim found a strange sword on a pedestal. The blade poured out an alluring light and played with incredible colors, beckoning the Primarch as if it had been waiting for the Phoenix-born for millennia. By taking that ancient artifact, Fulgrim sealed the fate of the Third Legion. All who had been in that cave discovered in themselves an overwhelming craving for pleasures and excess, and a hypertrophied perfectionism that could never be sated. Genetic experiments and other enhancements began to flourish in the Legion. On one hand, granting new combat traits, on the other, deforming Astartes into foul creatures unworthy of the title. And those deformities of the Emperor's children and their Primarch saw grotesque beauty and demanded ever more alterations. Fulgrim, always striving for perfection, under the blade's influence, reveled in new powers and illicit desires. Among civilians, the debauchery reached even greater heights. Revolting orgies, unbridled drinking, gruesome torment, and even ritual murders became normal among those assigned to the fleet. Many Space Marines refused to accept what their once glorious Legion was becoming. Inevitable conflicts arose between those who embraced the new visage and its promises, and those who remained faithful to old martial doctrines, imperial truths, and the bonds between the Emperor's children. By strange coincidence, the latter were often the detachments whose units had not taken part in the assault on the Laeran ritual cave. By that time, the Emperor's children had come upon Eldar colonies. The Eldar, shattered remnants of a dying civilization, contained seers who guided the few surviving fleets toward a dim future. One of these seers, in diplomatic council, showed Fulgrim terrible visions of the galaxy's fate and the figure who would play the central role in a loathsome conspiracy with the Dark Gods against the Emperor. By seeing the Slaanesh inscribed blade on the Primarch, the seer tried to kill Fulgrim. The trials failed. Fulgrim refused to believe Horus would betray him, but doubts were sown by an order from the Terran Administratum to investigate the warrior and his forces. The pretext was strange movements by some legions and expeditionary fleets, transfers of material and imperial regiments, and especially alarm over an incident on the moons of Darren, where rumors said Horus had taken part in a mysterious ritual contrary to imperial truth. The Administratum was also troubled by the bloodbath Angron had unleashed, with Horus's silent approval in the worlds of the Illyrian technocracy. Fulgrim and Horus were bound not only by brotherly ties, but by forged friendship. To imagine their favored son turning on the Emperor was impossible. To confirm whether his brother had betrayed them, or to dispel the Eldar Seer's claims, the Primarch of the Emperor's children came with his battle fleet to the Illyrian worlds, to the positions of Horus Lupercal's expedition. An experienced manipulator and ambitious intriguer, Horus immediately began to sway Fulgrim, convincing him that their father was a bloody tyrant who had set himself up as a god. That he had disposed of the Thunder Warriors once they had taken Terra, and would discard the Primarchs once the Suns had conquered the galaxy for him, leaving only the Custodians and some favorites like Guilliman, Dorn, and Sanguinius. Why had the father withdrawn to Terra? What was the secret project that even Horus had not been told of? Maybe forces were already being readied to remove inconvenient figures who had played their parts in the conquest of the galaxy. Maybe that was why the wolves were sent to Prospero, because Magnus the Red foresaw it. The Phoenix-born did not want to believe what he heard, but Fulgrim's mind had been long poisoned by the demon of the Lair Blade. The Slaanesh's demon had warped his critical faculties and sharpened his senses 100-fold. Resentment, malice, and envy ate at Fulgrim while Horus artfully presented his deadly case. At that moment, the Primarch of the Third Legion, Fulgrim, The loyal son and gifted commander, the legendary Phoenix, took Horus's side. Rogal had sided with the Dark Gods 4 decades earlier and became the Grey Eminence of the conspiracy. Angron had always hated the Emperor for the death of his gladiators on New Syria and was ready to rise against him in one way or another. Fulgrim, corrupted by Slanesh's demon and played upon by Horus, brought the Emperor's children into the traitor's fold. But among Horus's brothers, there were Primarchs not yet seduced by any Chaos God who made the measured decision to stand with the War Master in the coming war, such as the Primarch of the 14th Legion, Mortarion. Barbarous was a world of poisonous mists where people act out miserable lives in constant fear of giants who use living flesh in their internecine wars. These warlords, or gravelords, lived in high mountains wrapped in fumes capable of killing even a Primarch. After a battle, one such warlord found a wailing child. At first, he meant to kill it, but then realized a normal man could not even breathe there. Taking the strange child in his arms, he carried him from the battlefield. He had the son he had long desired and named the child Mortarion, Child of Death. The warlord raised and trained him in his image, teaching him the art of war. The young Primarch fought constantly against the warlord's armies and more besides. Mortarion wanted to know what lay beneath the mists and eventually escaped his adoptive father's realm and descended through the poisonous fog. Down below, Mortarion found his people, those free of the mists, and for the first time in his life he heard human laughter, learning that the warlords used his people as meat for their endless wars. He had sworn vengeance. He taught locals what he knew of war, forged weapons, armor, and respirators. Mortarion set about destroying the oppressors, becoming a dread army to the giants and a fearless leader to mankind. Yet, after hundreds of victories, he could not reach the highest mountain stronghold, where his adoptive father dwelt. One day, a stranger came to Barbarous, the mysterious stranger offering the young Primarch a chance to seize the last fortress alone. But if he failed, to join the stranger and obey him entirely. Mortarion began the ascent with hatred in his heart for the last warlord. He climbed higher than any human foot had gone, enduring poison and toxins. Reaching the summit with a scorched respirator and armor, he began to lose consciousness. The giant approached, resolved to fulfill his old promise to kill his adoptive son should he return. Before he lost consciousness, Mortarion saw the stranger slay the last warlord with a single blow. Awakening, Mortarion, despite misgivings, knelt to the stranger and swore to serve him. Only then did the stranger reveal himself and explain his purpose. The Emperor named the 14th Legion the Death Guard, in honor of their use of ancient Albion tactics. Mass attacks launched at dusk when fading light confused enemy lookouts and gathering shadows filled open ground. For more than 8 decades, the Death Guard had fought fiercely across the galaxy and the Great Crusades before finding their Primarch. Mortarion renamed the Legion the Death Guard. Their armor's trim and edges were made a dark green, while the bulk remained unpainted. In battle, the Death Guard usually fought as infantry rather than mechanized forces. Mortarion made sure his men were well equipped and trained. He insisted his legion be able to fight in almost any atmosphere without relying on specialist detachments. Because of Barbarous' toxic environment, the Death Guard became famed for their resistance to poison, diseases, and lethal environments. The Legion was also noted for extensive use of Terminator armor. Perhaps for this reason, the Death Guard excelled in hazardous boarding actions and close contact operations. Acting as a heavy infantry, they became experts in survival, endurance, and unyielding defense. Thus, the 14th gained a reputation as relentless foot soldiers who fulfilled duty to the Emperor without pomp. Though he obeyed the Emperor, Mortarion harbored resentment that the father had killed the last warlord on Barbarous, thereby saving his life. He was also a loyal friend to Horus. Mortarion met with the War Master and was promised a new age in which Primarchs would not be instruments of a dictator any different from false kings and mad monarchs. Instead, the Primarchs would rule the galaxy, bringing peace, freedom, and justice. After weighing his benefits and prospects and understanding the War Master's plans, Mortarion pledged the full support of the 14th Legion and its battle fleets. Angron, Mortarion, and Fulgrim returned to their legions, sowing heresy and preparing a conspiracy. Calmly and secretly, they spread corruption through their ranks using warrior lodges, recently authorized in their legion by the War Master and Lorgar, creating secret cults within cults. The unquestioning loyalty of Space Marine legions to their Primarchs became a vector for corruption against which the Astartes had no defense, and most succumbed. Most, but not all. Like Garviel Loken of the Sons of Horus, whose ear did not hear the whispers of darkness, and those whose pragmatism kept them from blindly embracing damnation, such as Nathaniel Garo of the Death God, for whom the Emperor remained as a god with no room for doubt. Many resisted. Many were Terrans who had joined the Great Crusade from the start, and whose loyalty predated the Primarch's discovery. Others, like Captain Demetrios of the Emperor's Children, were exceptional individualists hard to sway. There were legionaries, like Captain Erlen, veteran of the World Eaters, who saw their legion stray further from Astartes' ideals into a blood-mad pack. Despite the conflicts, none of them could imagine their legions turning against their brothers and the Emperor. The conspirators were cautious and kept their plans secret. As rot spread, Primarchs mocked those they judged untrustworthy and sentenced dissenters to death. Suddenly, a rebellion erupted on Istvan III. Imperial garrisons were cut down and the planet was turned into a fortress awaiting invasion. The renegade Primarchs used the uprising as a means of bloody purges in their legion, eliminating the inconvenient. Roughly a third of each legion's strength, ostensibly Imperial loyal Astartes, were assembled into assault forces. Veterans in those teams were puzzled by the strange mustering and could not understand what kind of rebellion required such monstrous force from 4 legions. But whatever rumors arose, those men were Astartes first and accustomed to following orders. Horus Lupercal's plan entered its first phase. After seizing the transmission relay, assault pods carrying troops from the 16th, 14th, 12th, and 3rd Legions descended on Istvan III. The Istvantins were well prepared. Deeply echeloned defenses and lines of underground communication gave the Death God a hard time and inflicted heavy casualties. Hidden firing positions mowed down World Eater assault companies. Istvan Psychers, called the Song Brethren, used sonic strikes to slow the Emperor's Children raids. A failed landing and lack of armor severely delayed Horus's Wolves' reinforcements, forcing them to fight from static positions. Yet, the Separatists were doomed. Nothing could hold back a coordinated attack by such an imposing contingent of Astartes. Resistance gradually became episodic. Soon after, the Space Marines began to gain the upper hand. All contact with the orbital fleet was cut, and the Legio Mortis Titans began to withdraw silently to empty plains beyond the city. Landing commanders reported the territorial gains and asked for reinforcements and further orders. But the only reply was ominous silence. After the assault forces departed for Istvan III, the fleet of the 4 legions began loading warheads filled with Life Devourer, exterminatus weapons, a pathogenic virus capable of annihilating all life on a planet. Such weapons could only be used with the War Master's sanction. His evil genius prepared such a cruel death for his own warriors, but even Horus could not foresee every contingency that might thwart his plans. Captain Saul Tarvitz of the 3rd Legion was not among the conspirators. Sensing something suspicious, he became an unwitting witness to the treacherous preparations and, unable to accept the horror of betrayal, he stole a shuttle from the landing bay to race to the surface of Istvan and warn the Space Marines there preparing orbital strikes. Only one fighting frigate, Eisenstein, was in his path, and it was ordered to destroy the renegade shuttle. By fortunate chance, the Eisenstein was commanded by Captain Nathaniel Garrow of the 14th Legion, the Death Guard. Garrow and Tarvitz were longtime friends who had fought side by side for years. Garrow, being Terran-born, also shared doubts about his Legion's strange changes. Hearing the terrible truth from his friend, Garrow refused the order and destroyed pursuing interceptors. On Istvan, circling the front, Captain Saul Tarvitz warned company commanders of the coming viral strike, trying to save as many Astartes as possible without delay. They were all battle-hardened fighters and hastily took up defenses and bunkers in the captured city of Charal, knowing their immediate task was to survive at any cost. In the great hall of the War Master's flagship, against the backdrop of dying Istvan, Horus Lupercal executed civilian iterators. This bloody act marked the beginning of the greatest heresy and was accompanied by words that would determine humanity's fate for millennia. Let the galaxy burn! Billions on the planet were destroyed. Those not devoured by the virus burned in conflagrations of flammable gases produced as the pathogen accelerated organic decomposition. A monstrous act of genocide and filthy betrayal was committed. Captain Nathaniel Garrow's frigate Eisenstein broke away from pursuers and fled the battle line with a single aim: to reach Terra by all means and warn the Emperor of his son's treachery. Watching the planet's death, Garrow hoped his comrades had survived and that he might bring aid. Before the Istvan landing, Fulgrim had handed command to his captain Eidolon and gone to the 10th Legion's expeditionary fleet to try, using close friendships, to sway Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, to Horus's side. After the Istvan incident, Ferrus Manus, like his brothers, had been cast upon the alien world of Medusa. Medusa is a harsh, inhospitable planet of tough, stoic people divided into warring clans. Ferrus, originally named Gorgon, did not join the tribes as many of his brothers had. He sought ways to make himself stronger and more perfect. These searches culminated in his battle with a great silver serpent called Azir. Azir was invulnerable to ordinary attack, and Ferrus was forced to drown it in lava. The molten flesh fused with Ferrus's own, making his hands like iron. After that, Ferrus returned to the tribes and taught them technology. Progress surged and the clans prospered. He did not unite them. He kept inter-clan competition and battle, believing it useful for weeding out weakness. He remained impartial. When the Emperor came to Medusa, Ferrus tested himself in combat with him. According to tale, entire mountains crumbled to dust in that epic clash. For the first time meeting an equal, Ferrus proclaimed the Emperor his lord and took command of the 10th Legion, renamed the Iron Hands. The demand for physical superiority extended to tools of war, and Gorgon became a master smith comparable only to Vulcan and the Salamanders. It is said Ferrus found peace only at a forge, crafting work beyond even the lords of Mars' reach. Ferrus's armor was heavy and durable as a super heavy tank, though he kept his hands free to wield their full power. Over decades, he forged countless weapons, gifting some to Primarch brothers and keeping others. He favored the heaviest warhammers and maces that only a Primarch could lift. Under Gorgon's leadership, the 10th became a true war machine, crude, efficient, and dedicated to a brutally straightforward method of warfare. Known for merciless calculation, the Iron Hands perfected fighting against both technologically advanced Xenos and furious orcs, whose numbers and brute force threatened the Crusade. The Iron 10th directed itself to the fiercest battles. Their motto, "Flesh is weak," and contempt for weakness, especially bodily weakness, made the Legion notorious for extensive use of bionics and augmentations. But it also produced a high level of technical proficiency across even rank and file, not only tech marines. Within the Iron Hands, there was no multi-tiered hierarchy like the Emperor's Children or Imperial Fists. Instead, the Legion was deliberately organized into interlinked components with their own specialties, duties, and vertical authority accountable only to themselves and higher command. The clans operated as autonomous, self-sufficient pocket legions led by appointed warlord or Iron Lord. Distinct clans competed for glory, deeds, and their Primarch's favor. Victory by the most direct and effective means was the Legion's mantra. Its warriors were the hands that struck down humanity's foes, remorseless and unstoppable as Ferrus Manus' Iron Hands. Fulgrim and Ferrus were close friends and fighting companions, each compensating for the other's flaws. Horus expected the Phoenixborn to bring the Iron Hands under his banner, but their conversation went badly from the start. The more Fulgrim tried to slander the father, exalt the War Master, and steer Ferrus to the desired conclusion, the more Ferrus suspected the awful truth and his brother's part in it. During their conversation, Fulgrim revealed Horus's plan and the scale of the betrayal. Whatever fraternal ties bound the two Primarchs, Ferrus Manus' loyalty to the Emperor was unshakable. In a brief clash, Fulgrim managed to stun Gorgon. Ships of the Emperor's Children at the center of the Iron Hands battle line opened dagger fire and inflicted terrible damage on the 10th Fleet. The Phoenixborn fled. Coming to himself and seeing the catastrophic damage and realizing the horror of what had happened, Ferrus Manus swore by his life to avenge Fulgrim's treachery. While in the warp, the Eisenstein was attacked by Immaterium entities. Shelling damaged the Gelar field generators, and the ship was helpless before the psychic storm and its denizens. Facing imminent death, Garo decided to exit warp immediately, but the abrupt transition killed the sensitive navigator. Now, no one could pilot the Eisenstein to Terra. Only navigators can chart warp routes. Alone, and in an uncharted region of space far from trade lanes, the Eisenstein's mission teetered on the brink of failure. Despairing, the crew jettisoned the warp drive into space after overloading the reactor. The explosion sent a bright flare into the warp. Now Garo could only hope that the warp flare would be seen by navigators and astropaths on ships passing through the Immaterium, and that their loyalties would be to the Emperor and not to the War Master. The Eisenstein's warp drive explosion did not go unnoticed. Soon the drifting frigate was found by the fleet of a Primarch destined to be the Imperium's chief defender in the coming civil war. Little is known of Rogal Dorn's youth. He is said to have been raised on the icy world of Inuit, among the caste clans of the planet's ice hives. The clan patriarch, known as House Dorn, soon became a grandfather figure who taught young Rogal tactics and survival. Even after learning he was not a blood relation, he treasured the memory of his grandfather. Thanks to Primarch physiology and superhuman nature, Rogal Dorn became a leader not only of his clan, but the whole planet and nearby space, eventually ruling the Inuit cluster as Emperor of House Dorn. Some 40 years after his grandfather's death, the Great Crusade reached Inwit. Dorn, at the helm of his wandering fleet, met the Emperor aboard his great starship, the Phalanx. The Emperor greeted his son warmly and left the Phalanx, which soon became the fortress monastery of the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists. Thus, the 7th Primarch was found. Dorn was utterly loyal to the Emperor and never sought reward for his fidelity. He was an exemplar of honesty and never lied even when the deception might have helped. Dorn commanded his legion and expeditionary fleets with the true dedication of a military genius. He was said to be the finest strategist among the Primarchs, combining Rabute Gilliman's discipline and composure, Lionel Johnson's courage, and flashes of fanatical zeal like Lehman Russ and Jagatai Khan. Rumor had it that the War Master held Dorn in such esteem that he had once said if the Imperial Fists, masters of defense, held a fortress against him and the Lunar Wolves, the battle would end in eternal stalemate. The 7th Legion originally formed on Terra and bore the name Roman until meeting their Primarch, after which they became the Imperial Fists. Highly disciplined, the Fists was suitable for any kind of battle. Their capacity for detailed operational planning let them participate effectively in sieges. Their unshakable tenacity made them superb defenders and urban fighters. This specialization sprang more from character and doctrine than an attachment to a single tactic or weapon. The Fists were also adept at assault. They could find and force an enemy's weak point. They were no less willing to fight in open battle, but siege and urban warfare were their forte. The Imperial Fist's single-mindedness had a downside. Refusal to accept that a position is untenable led to higher losses than they could afford. Yet, whatever the cost, their position will be held and the enemy broken, earning the Fist's high renown. On the battlefield, the 7th Legion would not yield an inch or admit enemy superiority. Still, they were not berserkers like the World Eaters. No matter how desperate, the Imperial Fists remained disciplined and focused, preferring death to perceived dishonor by admitting defeat. Shortly before the heresy, the 7th was recalled to Terra to stand as the Emperor's Praetorians, but their fleets were long stranded in the war by intensifying storms, and that circumstance brought Rogal, Dorn, and Nathaniel Garro together. Of course, Dorn could not believe the possibility that the Emperor's sons could betray him. Garro and his crew were declared deserters. However, on the Eisenstein, Garro saved civilian iterators from the War Master's flagship. Yafrida Keller, Kyrell Cinderman, and Mercedes Olton. In her memory augment, the record remained of the massacre of civilians on the Vengeful Spirit and the War Master's bombardment of loyalists on Istvan III. Rogal, Dorn, and his captains were stunned by the treachery of their brothers, led by arch-traitor Horus. It was urgent to reach the Emperor. The 7th Legion split. One part under the Primarch went to Terra, while another would reach the Istvan system, confirm the truth, assess the situation, and if possible, establish strong points for the future landing of Retribution forces. Because the legions of Horus, Fulgrim, Angron, and Mortarion were now primary targets for all loyal Imperial forces. Neither Rogal, Dorn, nor Garro knew about survivors on Istvan III, nor the heroic last stand, which made traitor forces pay dearly for their betrayal.